This is betrayal. Pure and simple betrayal. Brianna's voice echoed through the break room as she waved my resignation letter in the air like evidence at a trial. I stood there, coffee mug in hand, watching my manager of 12 years completely lose her composure in front of half the office staff. How could you do this to me, Karen? After everything I've done for you? I set my mug down carefully on the counter, keeping my expression neutral. The room had gone dead silent except for the hum of the vending machine. Everyone was staring, waiting to see how this would play out. Brianna's face was flushed red, her perfectly styled blonde hair slightly disheveled from her dramatic gesturing. Actually, Brianna, I haven't submitted a resignation letter, I said calmly. That appears to be a job application I submitted to Gravora Group. How exactly did you get access to that? Her eyes narrowed dangerously. That doesn't matter. What matters is that you've been going behind my back, plotting to leave us. After 12 years of loyalty, this is how you repay Northrise Apparel. I almost laughed at the irony. 12 years of loyalty, 12 years of staying late, covering for her mistakes, managing client relationships she couldn't handle, and watching younger employees get promoted over me. 12 years of hearing maybe next year every time I asked for the raise I deserved. I've been exploring my options, I replied, maintaining my professional tone even as my blood pressure rose. It's a competitive job market, and I believe in staying informed about opportunities. Opportunities? Brianna's voice cracked slightly. You have everything you need right here. I've protected you, Karen. I've shielded you from the executive pressure upstairs. And this is how you thank me? The silence stretched uncomfortably. My coworkers were pretending to busy themselves with coffee and snacks, but I could feel their eyes on us. Jennifer from accounting looked particularly uncomfortable, probably remembering all the times she'd heard Brianna complain about having to manage difficult employees like me. I think we should continue this conversation in your office, I suggested, not wanting to air our dirty laundry any further in front of the team. But Brianna was beyond caring about professionalism now. No, I think everyone should hear this. Everyone should know what kind of person you really are. Disloyal, ungrateful, scheming. I felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just about me job searching. This was about control, about Brianna's desperate need to maintain her authority over me. And in that moment, watching her public meltdown, I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. She was terrified of losing me because she knew she couldn't do my job. The realization hit me like a freight train, and suddenly, everything made perfect sense. My name is Karen Whitley, and I'm 45 years old. For the past 12 years, I've been a senior logistics coordinator at Northrise Apparel, a mid-sized clothing distribution company based in Charlotte, North Carolina. When I started here, I was 33, recently divorced, and desperate for stability. The job seemed perfect. Good benefits, reasonable hours, and a chance to build something meaningful in supply chain management. Brianna Lowe had been my manager for the entire duration. She was 38 when she hired me, ambitious and sharp, with a business degree from Duke, and big dreams of climbing the corporate ladder. In those early days, we worked well together. She appreciated my attention to detail and my ability to handle difficult vendor relationships. I genuinely thought we were building something as a team. The first few years were good. I learned the industry, built relationships with our key suppliers and transportation partners, and developed systems that streamlined our operations significantly. Brianna took credit for most of these improvements during her performance reviews, which I understood was part of office politics. I was content to do the work and let her have the recognition, assuming that my contributions would eventually be acknowledged. But somewhere around year 5, things started to shift. Brianna became more territorial, more controlling. She began micromanaging my client communications and insisted on being copied on every email. When I suggested process improvements, she would listen politely and then implement watered-down versions weeks later, presenting them as her own ideas to upper management. The first time I asked for a raise was in my 6th year. I had just successfully negotiated a new contract with our largest supplier that saved the company nearly $200,000 annually. I scheduled a meeting with Brianna, prepared a presentation outlining my contributions, and made my case. She listened, nodded thoughtfully, and promised to take it up the chain. 2 weeks later, she called me into her office with an apologetic expression. "I fought for you, Karen. I really did. But with the current budget constraints, they just can't approve any salary increases right now. Maybe next review cycle." I was disappointed but not surprised. The economy was shaky, and I knew companies were being cautious with expenses. I decided to wait and prove my value even more decisively. The second request came a year later, after I had successfully managed a crisis when our primary warehouse flooded. I had coordinated with backup facilities, rerouted shipments, and ensured that we didn't miss a single delivery deadline. The incident could have cost us millions in lost business, but my quick thinking and existing relationships saved the day. Again, Brianna promised to advocate for me. Again, she came back with apologies about budget constraints and corporate policies, but this time, I noticed something odd. 2 months later, Marcus from accounting mentioned that Brianna had gotten a significant raise and a new title, Senior Operations Manager. That's when I started paying closer attention to the company's actual financial health, and what I discovered made my stomach turn. The truth hit me like a slap in the face during a routine vendor meeting in my 8th year at Northrise Apparel. Our fabric supplier, Janet Morrison, was congratulating us on the company's incredible growth trajectory and mentioning how impressed she was with our record-breaking quarterly profits. I smiled and nodded, but inside, alarm bells were screaming. Record-breaking profits. While Brianna had been telling me for years that budget constraints prevented any salary increases. That evening, I stayed late and did some research. As a senior logistics coordinator, I had access to shipping volumes, vendor payments, and transportation costs. It wasn't hard to piece together a rough picture of our revenue streams. The numbers were staggering. Not only was Northrise Apparel incredibly profitable, but our logistics division, which I essentially ran single-handedly, was generating far more value than I had ever imagined. I calculated my own contribution conservatively. The vendor relationships I maintained, the cost-saving measures I had implemented, the crisis management that had prevented major losses. My work was directly responsible for at least $800,000 in annual value creation, and I was being paid $62,000 a year. The betrayal cut deep, but what made it worse was the pattern I started noticing. When I requested my third raise in year 9, Brianna's response was more elaborate. She sat me down with a concerned expression and explained that while she personally valued my contributions, the executive team was concerned about equity across departments. She couldn't justify giving me a raise when other coordinators in different divisions weren't receiving increases. But 6 months later, I learned that Derek in purchasing had received a $15,000 bump, and Stephanie in customer service had been promoted to supervisor with a significant salary increase. Both had been with the company for less time than me and handled far less complex responsibilities. The fourth and final time I asked for a raise was just 8 months ago. By then, I had been with the company for 11 years and 4 months. I had successfully managed the integration of our new warehouse management system, trained 3 junior coordinators, and maintained a vendor satisfaction rate of 97%. I prepared the most comprehensive presentation of my career, complete with financial impact analyses and industry salary comparisons. Brianna's response was swift and final. "Karen, I've been patient with these requests, but I need you to understand that your current compensation is appropriate for your role. Continuing to push for increases that aren't justified by company policy isn't helping your professional development. I suggest you focus on expanding your skill set instead of focusing on monetary compensation." That night, I went home to my small apartment and opened my laptop. I updated my resume for the first time in over a decade and started browsing job postings. I wasn't angry anymore. I was determined. If Brianna thought my skills weren't worth investing in, perhaps it was time to find someone who disagreed. What I didn't expect was how quickly that someone would appear, or how drastically everything would change once they did. 3 months after I started my quiet job search, Gravora Group reached out to me through LinkedIn. Their message was professional but intriguing. They were looking for an experienced logistics director to head their East Coast operations, and my background at Northrise Apparel had caught their attention. The salary range they mentioned in that initial contact was nearly double what I was currently making. I should have been excited, but instead, I felt a strange mix of validation and sadness. Here was proof that my skills were valuable in the marketplace, but it also confirmed that I had wasted years accepting Brianna's excuses about my worth. The interview process with Gravora Group was unlike anything I had experienced at Northrise. They asked detailed questions about my vendor management strategies, wanted to understand my crisis response protocols, and seemed genuinely interested in my ideas for operational improvements. The hiring manager, Patricia Wells, had done her homework. She referenced specific contracts I had negotiated and mentioned savings initiatives I had implemented years ago. "Your reputation in the industry is impressive," Patricia told me during our second interview. "Several of our suppliers have mentioned you specifically as someone they enjoy working with. That kind of relationship building is exactly what we need." I tried not to think about how Brianna had never acknowledged those relationships, had in fact often seemed threatened when vendors asked to speak with me directly. The offer came through 2 weeks later. Senior Director of Logistics Operations, $95,000 annually, full benefits, and a clear path to the executive team. I stared at the email for a full 10 minutes, trying to process that someone was finally offering me what I knew I was worth. But I wasn't ready to accept immediately. 12 years was a long time, and despite everything, I felt I owed Brianna and Northrise one final chance to match the offer. It was probably naive, but I scheduled a meeting with her to discuss my career trajectory. "I've been thinking about my future here," I began carefully, "and I wanted to discuss potential opportunities for advancement." Brianna barely looked up from her computer. "Karen, we've talked about this. Your role is important to the team, and you're compensated fairly for your level of responsibility." "Actually, I've received an external offer that suggests otherwise," I said quietly. That got her attention. Her fingers stopped typing, and she slowly turned to face me. "What kind of offer?" "A senior director position with a competitor. The compensation is significantly higher than what I'm currently earning here." For a moment, something that might have been panic flashed across her face. Then her expression hardened. "I see. And you think this is appropriate? Using outside offers to manipulate your current employer?" I blinked, stunned by her response. "I'm not trying to manipulate anyone. I'm giving you the opportunity to retain someone who has contributed significantly to this company's success." "Contributed?" Brianna's voice rose slightly. "Karen, you do your job, nothing more. You follow the processes I've established and maintain relationships I've helped you build. If you think you're irreplaceable, you're deluding yourself." The words hit me like physical blows. 12 years of late nights, crisis management, and going above and beyond. And this was how she saw my contributions. I felt something inside me shift, a final acceptance that this relationship was beyond repair. "I see," I said quietly. "I appreciate your perspective." She must have sensed the change in my tone because she leaned forward slightly. "Look, I don't want to lose you over some recruiter's empty promises. These outside companies make big offers to steal talent, then cut people during the first restructuring. You're safe here, Karen. You have job security." Job security. At a salary that was apparently 60% below market rate, with a manager who saw me as easily replaceable. The irony was almost funny. "I'll need to think about it," I told her. That evening, I called Patricia Wells and accepted Gravora Group's offer. What I discovered during my 2-week notice period at Gravora Group changed everything I thought I knew about the logistics industry. Patricia Wells introduced me to their existing client portfolio, and I was shocked to see how many companies were actively looking to switch from their current providers due to service issues. 3 names on their prospect list made my heart race: Coastal Manufacturing, Pinnacle Textiles, and Morrison Fabrics. All 3 were massive accounts that Northrise Apparel had held for over a decade. All 3 were apparently frustrated with their current service levels and looking for alternatives. These companies have expressed interest in switching, Patricia explained during my first week. But they've been hesitant because their current provider has established relationships and knows their specific requirements. We need someone who understands their operations intimately. I stared at the files, my mind racing. I knew these companies' operations better than anyone except possibly their own internal teams. I had spent years learning their seasonal patterns, their rush delivery requirements, their preferred shipping windows. I had personally negotiated their contracts, resolved their crises, and built relationships with their key personnel. How long have they been considering a switch? I asked carefully. Morrison Fabrics has been vocal about their dissatisfaction for 6 months. They've had several delivery delays and communication issues. Coastal Manufacturing is frustrated with lack of flexibility in their shipping options. Pinnacle Textiles has been asking about our sustainability initiatives because their current provider isn't meeting their environmental standards. Every issue she mentioned was something I had tried to address at Northrise, only to be told by Brianna that the current processes work fine and that change was unnecessary disruption. But the most shocking revelation came when Patricia handed me a folder marked Competitive Analysis. "We've been tracking your former employer's performance metrics," she said. "Their client retention has been declining, and we're hearing reports of internal management issues." I opened the folder to find detailed analyses of Northrise Apparel's operations. What I saw made my stomach drop. Delivery performance had declined 23% over the past 2 years. Customer satisfaction scores were down across all major accounts. Most telling of all, 3 significant accounts had already terminated their contracts in the past 6 months. "How did you gather this information?" I asked. Patricia smiled. "Industry connections. Vendors talk to each other. Suppliers share experiences. Your former company's reputation has been sliding for quite some time." I thought about all the vendor complaints I had quietly managed, all the client frustrations I had smoothed over, all the fires I had put out before Brianna even knew they existed. Without me there to maintain those relationships and solve those problems, everything was apparently falling apart. That evening, I called Robert Ewald at Morrison Fabrics. We had worked together for 8 years, and he had always been straightforward with me about his concerns. "Karen, I heard you moved to Gravora Group. Congratulations on the promotion." "Thank you, Robert. I'm settling in well. I understand you've been having some challenges with your current logistics provider." There was a pause. "That's putting it mildly. Since you left, nothing works the same way. Delivery schedules are inconsistent, communication is terrible, and frankly, I don't trust their new account manager to handle our requirements properly." "New account manager?" "Some junior person who doesn't understand our business. They keep trying to change our established protocols, and when we push back, they say they need to check with their supervisor. It's frustrating." My heart sank. Brianna had assigned one of the junior coordinators to handle Morrison Fabrics, one of our most complex and demanding clients. It was a recipe for disaster. "Robert, what would it take to consider switching providers?" The question hung in the air for a moment before he laughed. "Are you making me an offer, Karen?" The call with Robert Ewald opened floodgates I hadn't expected. Within 48 hours of our conversation, he had scheduled a formal meeting with Gravora Group to discuss transitioning Morrison Fabrics logistics operations. The contract was worth $1.2 million annually, but that was just the beginning. Jennifer Hayes from Coastal Manufacturing called me directly 2 days later. "Karen, I hope you don't mind me reaching out. Robert Ewald mentioned you had moved to Gravora Group and frankly were desperate for help." I listened as she detailed 6 months of frustrations with Northrise Apparel. Missed delivery windows, inflexible scheduling, and what she described as arrogant responses when they raised concerns about service quality. "The final straw was last week," Jennifer continued. "We had an urgent shipment that needed to go out for a product launch, and instead of working with us to find a solution, their account manager told us our expectations were unrealistic and that we needed to plan better. Karen, you know our business. You know we don't make unrealistic demands." She was right. Coastal Manufacturing was actually one of our easiest clients. They planned well in advance, communicated clearly, and rarely asked for special accommodations. If they were having problems, it was definitely a service failure on Northrice's end. "What would a transition look like from your perspective?" I asked. "Honestly, we've been ready to switch for months. We just needed to find a provider who understands our operations. With you at Gravora Group, that concern disappears." The third call came from Margaret Torres at Pinnacle Textiles, and her message was even more direct. "Karen, we're terminating our contract with Northrise Apparel effective next month. Their environmental reporting is inconsistent, their sustainability initiatives are practically non-existent, and frankly, we don't trust their account management anymore. Are you interested in taking over our logistics operations?" I sat in my new office at Gravora Group, staring at my phone in disbelief. 3 of Northrise Apparel's largest clients were actively seeking to terminate their relationships and move to my new company. Combined, these contracts represented over $3.5 million in annual revenue. Patricia Wells was ecstatic when I presented the opportunities. "Karen, this is incredible. These transitions could establish us as a major player in the regional market." But I felt a strange mix of triumph and guilt. These clients weren't following me because I had poached them. They were fleeing Northrise because the service quality had deteriorated so dramatically in my absence. In just 1 month, everything I had built and maintained over 12 years was crumbling. The guilt faded quickly when I remembered Brianna's words. "You follow the processes I've established and maintain relationships I've helped you build." She had truly believed that my contributions were minimal, that anyone could do what I did. The irony was devastating. Patricia and I spent the rest of the week developing transition plans for all 3 accounts. Gravora Group's operations team was energized by the prospect of such significant growth, and I found myself more excited about work than I had been in years. But the real satisfaction came when I thought about Monday morning at Northrise Apparel. 3 major clients would be submitting termination notices, each one specifically requesting that their operations be transferred to Gravora Group. The letters would land on Brianna's desk like bombs, and she would finally understand exactly what I had been worth to her company. The woman who had dismissed my contributions as easily replaceable was about to learn the hard way that some relationships can't be rebuilt once they're broken. Monday morning at 9:15 a.m., 3 certified letters arrived at Northrise Apparel's corporate office. I knew this because Patricia Wells had coordinated the timing precisely. Morrison Fabrics, Coastal Manufacturing, and Pinnacle Textiles had all sent formal termination notices, citing service failures and announcing their transition to Gravora Group effective immediately. The calls started coming to my new office before 10 a.m. "Karen, we need to talk." Brianna's voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the panic underneath. "Hello, Brianna. How can I help you?" "Don't play games with me. You poached our clients. This is corporate sabotage, and there will be legal consequences." I almost laughed. "Brianna, I didn't poach anyone. These companies contacted Gravora Group independently because they were dissatisfied with their current service provider. Perhaps you should examine why 3 major clients decided to terminate their relationships within a month of my departure." The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, more desperate. "These clients, they've been with us for years. We can fix whatever problems they're having. Can you talk to them? Convince them to give us another chance?" The request was so audacious that I actually did laugh. "You want me to convince clients to stay with the company that fired me for disloyalty? The company where my contributions were apparently minimal and easily replaceable? Karen, please. I made mistakes. We can work something out." "I'm afraid that's not possible. My loyalty is with Gravora Group now." I hung up, feeling a satisfaction I hadn't expected. The woman who had dismissed me so casually was now begging for my help to save the very relationships she had claimed credit for building. By Wednesday, the full scope of the crisis at Northrise Apparel became clear. Patricia Wells had industry contacts who kept us informed about the chaos unfolding across town. The 3 client departures had triggered a massive revenue shortfall that sent shockwaves through the company's executive team. Combined, The lost contracts represented 32% of Northrise's annual logistics revenue. The immediate financial impact was devastating, but the long-term implications were even worse. Other clients were now questioning their relationships with Northrise. Word had spread quickly through the industry that their largest accounts were jumping ship, and smaller clients were suddenly paying closer attention to service issues they had previously overlooked. The executive team had called an emergency board meeting for Thursday. According to our sources, heads were going to roll. But the sweetest revenge came in the form of a phone call I received Wednesday afternoon. "Miss Whitley? This is David Patterson from Northrise Apparel's executive team. I believe we may have made some errors in how we handled your departure." I recognized the name. He was the vice president of operations, Brianna's boss. "I'm listening, Mr. Patterson. We'd like to offer you your position back, with a significant salary increase and a promotion to director level. We recognize that we undervalued your contributions to the company." The offer was almost insulting in its desperation. "Director level. The position I should have been promoted to years ago, and a salary that was probably still below what Gravora Group was paying me. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Patterson, but I'm very happy in my current role. Miss Whitley, please reconsider. We're prepared to be very flexible on compensation and responsibilities." I'm afraid my answer is final. When I hung up, I realized that this moment, being courted by the company that had dismissed my worth, represented the complete vindication of everything I had endured. The woman who had blocked my advancement for years was about to face the consequences of her poor judgment, and I wouldn't be there to save her. As I reflected on the revenge that had unfolded so naturally, I understood that sometimes the best payback comes not from elaborate schemes, but from simply allowing people to experience the full consequences of their actions when you're no longer there to shield them from the fallout.